Since 2017, the Italian Wine Podcast has exploded and expects to hit 6 million listens by the end of July 2023. We're celebrating this success by recognizing those who have shared the journey with us and giving them the opportunity to contribute to the ongoing success of the shows. By buying a paper copy of the Italian Wine Unplugged 2.0 or making a donation to help the ongoing running costs, members of the international Italian wine community will be given the chance to nominate future guests and even enter a prize draw to have lunch with Stevie Kim and Professor Attilio Scienza. To find out more, visit us at italianwinepodcast.com. Chin chin!
Welcome to Masterclass US Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. This show has been designed to demystify the US market for Italian wineries through interviews with experts in sales and distribution, social media, communications, and so much more. We will quiz each of our esteemed guests at the end of each episode to solidify the lessons that we've learned. So sharpen your pencils, get out your notebooks, and join us each week to learn more about the US market. Hello, welcome to Masterclass US Wine Market. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Mike Osborn to the Italian Wine Podcast. Mike is the founder and EVP of Wine.com. He has been a pioneer in online wine retailing since founding Wine.com as eVineyard in 1998. Mike leads the company's efforts in merchandising its wine and gifts and holds key wine industry relationships worldwide. We're so excited to have you here today, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Juliana.
Of course, absolutely. So before we dive into today's discussion about e-commerce in the U.S. market, Mike, tell us a little bit more about how you took your background in software and technology, you even founded a software company in high school, pretty impressive, and transformed that into the career you have today in the wine industry and with Wine.com.
I liked computers when I was young, a bit of a hobbyist, and I had a chance to learn programming and software at an early age when it wasn't being taught necessarily in schools yet even. So anyway, I spent the first 10 years in my working life in software and systems, and that gave me an opportunity to have a wine habit or a hobby in wine just the same. And it was it was in late the 1990s, and specifically in 98 when we started a business. We called it eVineyard at first before we could acquire the Wine.com moniker later on. But eVineyard started as, basically a force at putting some e-commerce software at work in an industry that I felt really needed a database on top of it. As a young consumer looking at the shelf of wine, the wall of wine that's frequently called, it was discouraging because there was only so much information a producer could put on their front or even their back label for that matter. And yet this industry and our category is so cool because it has, geography, it has place, it has people who make it. There's all the objective things like, the grapes that are in it, the vintage it was born in, it was produced in, and, all of that objective information I always thought needed to be exposed. There's the subjective. You might like a wine that I don't like and vice versa, and probably do. But I always thought that subjective part was far less important than just getting information and distilling it down for a customer to look for it.
Right.
And that's what a database does. And that's what e-commerce stood for early on, not just obviously an informational site about wine, but we also squarely wanted to be the retailer. We wanted to own that customer relationship and the distribution of it, because that's not simple in the U.S.
Of course.
And as a result, it's a little bit of equal parts technology, merchandising, and operations. Being able to get that order to a consumer.
But really, it sounds like you identified a problem in the way that wine was being presented in brick and mortar retail in terms of the information that was able to be shared, as you said, on a bottle, not being able to convey the full story of that bottle and really share all the incredible stories behind that wine, and at the same time identifying a solution in the sense of an online database.
Yeah, if I were to walk into a wine store 25 years ago, or I could even say tomorrow, and you stand at the front desk and you say, "Hey, bring me every bottle of wine under $25 from the Great Grenache that James Suckling rated 92 points or higher. It, you know, if you might be asked to leave,
Probably.
but if you could have that sort, you would find your way to Cananao from Sardinia. You would find your way to Garnacha from various regions of Spain. You would find some McLaren Vale Grenache and probably some from the central coast of California. The cool thing is that it can break down the intimidation of the industry, and of course I'm not saying I want to dumb anything down. I'd love consumers to know that Cananao is the Sardinian Grenache, and if you like Grenache, yeah, you might try this, right?
Right.
So the idea of helping someone discover wine in just that, we always refer to it, the company as, a plus one. Just take your knowledge, add one more step to it, one more opportunity to peel the onion on this complicated category, and you'll learn something new. Nobody needs just another wine merchant,
Right.
but you do need somebody who, in outposts like ours, that has the breadth of a category.
Right. Absolutely. And has all the information categorized, like you said, in database format to give consumers what they're looking for. So, Mike, in this episode, obviously e-commerce has evolved quite a bit since you started wine.com in the late 90s. So we are really excited to learn from you today a few things. And what we're going to focus on for today's masterclass are, number one, how has wine e-commerce evolved over the last 25 years? Number two, what are some of the key trends today in e-commerce for Italian wine specifically? And then number three, how can wineries maximize their profile and their presence on wine.com in order to share those stories and give that information to the consumer? So just to dive right in, let's talk about what's changed in the last 2.5 decades since you've been at this.
Well, so, obviously, clearly, quite a lot has in terms of consumer adoption. Um, you know, I'm I might start with saying that when we were launching the company, we had these ambitions of selling 2,500 different wines. Today, our customers in New York and California, our two largest centers that we distribute out of, those customers in serviced markets out of those two states get more than 15,000
Wow.
wines available to them, and spirits alike, but maybe a couple thousand spirits. But wine business, 15,000 at a time. Some of our smaller states where we operate, and I don't want to get necessarily on a regulatory rabbit hole here, but we do have warehouses also in Boston. We also have them in Houston, Texas, Columbus, Ohio, in New Jersey, and so six total. But in our smaller states, we can't have 15,000 wines on the shelf because they just don't have enough consumers in those
Right.
states where we service locally. But the two big ones, New York, California, which service primarily the eastern U.S. and the western U.S. respectively, that assortment is not
Yeah.
2,500. It couldn't have been. What was happening is we found as we grew the choices, we grew the business, and it was fascinating because some people would say, well, if you offer too many, it becomes the paradox of choice versus the long tail business that we were after. The more interesting is that the paradox of choice, if you are given tools to help filter and sort, sort of like I described earlier, Grenache, $25 rated under, available to me. These kind of sorts help filter down the list to a few number that you might want to consider. And what we've been able to do that we couldn't do in 1998 is actually staff the website with live SOMs that can answer questions for you.
Mm.
So it's a combination of, and these are real people. This is now I realize that there's
Of
AI on its
course.
way, and there could be wine GPT coming soon. But it is rather this is wine experts. They're well and above. We've got a customer service team too, which is there to help with customer orders and expediting shipments and the like. But this is a specialized team who are available most hours of the day and are able to answer questions for consumers. So that's our answer to the steward in a wine store or the som at a restaurant, but to help provide additional guidance and get you on your way. But that the selection idea is one of just covering the world. What I found interesting as a consumer was if I were to step into a wine shop and go looking for their, selection of wine from Sicily or Sardinia or the Veneto, it would be rather small,
Right.
if at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then you might ask, like, where are your wines from Sicily? And the answer frequently was, well, customers, don't buy wine from Sicily here.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell why. It's self-fulfilling. There's no wine
Right.
on the shelf. So, I said a little bit about our selection of wines in general, but Italian wines, we've got 2,000, 2,500 actually, available in New York and California just from
Oh,
Italy
wow.
alone. And there are plenty of wine stores that don't have 2,500 wines,
Of
period.
course.
And you're lucky for a grocer in the U.S. to have 500, 600 different wines. There's 2,500 from Italy. And then that means if you add a little vintage specificity to it, which we do, everything we sell is a vintage wine. If you go back and look over a course of a year, there's more than 7,000 unique wines from Italy this past year
Just in 1 year being sold.
in the past year from about we've got 1,000. I looked it up earlier for you, Juliana. 1,073 different producers, different brands.
Okay.
So it's massive, and we've done this not just in Italy alone, but we're talking Italian today. But for the world, it helps for customers to have access, and that's we feel that very strongly. I know that the industry has terminology like SKU rationalization, sell only the most popular. Well, that's a real boring business, I think.
Right. I agree, because the wine is not like selling toothpaste, and right, that might be the case in other categories that a few brands dominate, but we're in an industry with so much more rich diversity and access and producers out there in the world. It's so much of it is, like we said, about access to the consumer and getting them in front of these products by using information, by using filters, just like the Grenache and Colangelo example. I love that example. I think that's a great way to illustrate what you're doing with wine.com. And talk to us a little bit, within Italian wine and all those SKUs you mentioned that you're selling. What are some of the categories that you've seen trending in recent years? What's evolved within the Italian wine category on wine.com?
I was looking to glean some of that out. First, I'll just step back at one moment and just let you know that the complexion of wines between, sort of the share between red, white, and bubbly, let's call it versus sparkling wine. Um, our our national business is very different than a lot of the U.S. retailers in that customers buy a lot more red wine from wine.com overall. And then with Italy, and I'll use units as opposed to revenue because it's even more stark when you start looking at revenue. When it comes to red wines, as you can imagine, collectible wines from Brunello and Piedmonte and Barbaresco and the like could be more expensive. But just in units alone, 56% of our business is red wine, 24% is white, and 18% are sparkling, with a couple left in the share between rosé and some dessert wines. But that largely red wine, that kind of leads you down the path to know that, yeah, Tuscany matters, Piedmont matters, the Veneto matters, and it's hard because of, I think it's the maturity of the business and our customers. It's harder on a year-over-year basis to look at many trends because some of them take build up over time, and even
Right.
our sparkling number from Italy at 18% does go to show you over the years, our customers have adopted sparkling wine from Trento Doc and Prosecco alike. So that's important because it's nearly as important as white wine alone. But in the past year, I did see one interesting thing is that Tuscany, and then more specifically Sangiovese, lost share to Piedmont. And we were down in the trailing 12 months. We're down about 3.5% from Tuscany, but Piedmont picked up 2% of those units.
Huh.
And then that if you can kind of peel the onion back and see the same holds true with the variety itself of grape. So Sangiovese losing to some Nebbiolo, and that was interesting because I you know I don't think I haven't seen that, if I didn't stop and kind of look, what's the trend look like today? And that's one of
Right.
them. I don't think it's alarming at all. I think it's probably has a lot to do with, opportunities for consumers to discover. I know there's probably more for everyone to discover about Tuscany, but we have a lot of consumers who love light-bodied, um, food-friendly wines, and I personally would, probably tip my hat to Piedmont for that purpose, and maybe even the recognition that that region has gotten, within restaurants, throughout the country too.
Right, absolutely. And also maybe that speaks to the premiumization trend we've been seeing of consumers spending more on average per bottle, right? Can you remind us, and share with listeners is the average bottle price on wine.com?
Yeah, and I'll give you the Italian number even. The in calendar year ending in July of 22, it was $27.18 a bottle. Calendar ending this past month, so July of 23, it's up to $27.38. So it's gained 20 cents
Okay.
per bottle, on a really large base of bottles. So, that's very good to see, and that's all in. Obviously, red wine, higher ASP than whites, but the national average, depends on numbers you see, but $10 to $12 is pretty typical. I think Nielsen says in a 750 milliliter bottle, it's around, it's in the $10-11 range. In some retailers higher, but having it three times the national average does go to show you that it is a premium customer
Right.
at wine.com, and they are buying, they're buying wines from the, best growing regions of the world.
Right. They're a more advanced consumer for sure. That's shopping online. And we saw e-commerce change quite a bit in the pandemic, right? And it boomed. And then it came down a little bit as well, and things have gone back to quote unquote normal, I guess we can say, here in the summer of 2023. But talk to us, Mike, a little bit about some of the changes you saw at wine.com during the pandemic, and what changes have lasted through to today, and what were more short-term changes that maybe have not lasted post-pandemic.
Italian Wine Podcast, part of the Mama Jumbo Shrimp family.
You're bringing back the dreaded pandemic. Clearly, e-commerce, had a boom, and you said it. We were prepared for this in part because, our call center, was already remote in home office. All of our systems and software, our employees could continue doing their job. Now, our operations team needed to be in a warehouse, so we added shifts of workers. We added a lot of, temporary, part-time personnel during the pandemic, much like we do at the holiday season.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, this was just the, mid March of 2020 when that nightmare happened. But we were just coming off of the holiday season, so the operations team took the holiday playbook right out and began to execute on it.
Right.
And so we were prepared, okay, but nobody is prepared to have their business double, or in our case, more than double in size.
Right.
And that was very trying on. I mean, again, be respectful of industries that really had it at hand, but our role here was just to satisfy this insatiable demand for wine at home, and we did it, and our team stepped up, and it was quite the year. Now, if I could just remove the virus from our comparisons and growth, and we started doing that, 6 months ago, when we looked at comparing, what did the business look like in 2019
Mm-hmm.
compared to 2022? And that means, just let's pretend that 2020 and 21 didn't happen.
Gladly.
Go with me, Juliana. Yeah. So it's interesting. So Italian wine at wine.com grew 53%. Now our own business grew 59. So it was, I would just say in general, Italy stayed up with our growth as well. It's awfully close. Okay, 53% growth. The wine industry, grew 11.5% in that same period of time. So, reported by Nielsen IQ, 2019 to 2022, 11.5% growth. 53% Italian wine at wine.com, or 59 overall. So what you can see here is that e-commerce did grow. We pulled consumers into
Right.
this new way of buying, and so it certainly pulled forward some growth. I wish it didn't have to take a global pandemic to do
Of
that.
course.
We were sort of perfectly fine, working on a growth rate that was measured in the low teens, mid to low teens for as a growth rate for years and years, and that was something we knew well. But growing and then detracting, retracting a bit, was hard on every industry, and wine.com is no different.
Right.
We are glad that again we left the pandemic with a lot more members to our stewardship program, consumers who had discovered wine.com, and that consumer base, those are the ones that are sticky today. They're the ones who have found discovered a new way to buy wine,
Hmm.
and to buy a whole lot of different wine.
Right.
And that again, it kind of shows you that in the respect of the number of different SKUs being offered in every region, including Italy, and how that's grown with them.
And also some of the growth you're seeing, like you referenced earlier, just in terms of the Italian category, it's telling us what kind of consumer is stayed engaged with wine.com. So I think, what I'm hearing, Mike, is that we saw overall growth in e-commerce, of course, past the pandemic. It did change a lot of consumer behavior into getting more used to buying wine online. But what we're seeing stick around long term, it's the more highly engaged consumer still that is most engaged with e-commerce. That's seems to be what you're saying,
Yeah, yeah.
correct?
And also the age demographics, and we didn't talk about that,
Great point.
but the component of age really does matter. Now, every consumers, young and old, have computers today and have smartphones, so it's not that mouse dexterity becomes the tripping point here, but it does bode that consumers who are attracted to wine.com, and perhaps to all of this global information about wine and content, are younger consumers than a lot of the industry sees. So let me share the Italian numbers. Our millennial and younger consumer last year represented 26% of our customer
Overall.
base who bought Italian wine. And Gen X, which is this narrow band of consumers, I think born, I might get this wrong here, but Gen X from 1964 or 65 through to
Early
1980.
80s. Yeah, that
Okay,
sounds right.
so that
Hmm.
range is 38% of our base. 38% are those customers, and they're in their 40s and into mid 50s this year. Boomers, those born after 1946 through the Gen X, then was is 32% of our
Okay.
business, and those older, or the age of my parents, are 4% our uh, of our customers. So boomers, matter. Don't get me wrong, but I think they show up more in a lot of stats about the wine industry than Gen X and millennials. And to have a quarter of our business, these customers already buying, young consumers buying Italian wine, is exciting because if you just measure the lifetime value, they've got a lot more lifetime ahead of them.
Yes, right. And they also, you would imagine they're going to hopefully continue to trade up, continue to explore. I think we've talked a lot about this demographic not being as brand loyal, but perhaps more exploratory in terms of trying different regions and trying different varietals as well. So a lot of opportunity there for a lot of different wineries.
I agree, and I wouldn't say I don't think anything's wrong with being loyal to Prosecco or being loyal to Barbaresco. That is
Good
a
point.
brand, if you will. At some level, the idea that sure they might not just always want to drink the same Prosecco every night. They don't have to, and why not? I think in regions of Italy, and it's certainly true in other parts of Europe as well, but some of the DOCs then are brands alone, and help somebody kind of onboard to another wine. They might pick up the back label and learn the grape. They're going to read about it on wine.com, we hope. And we do source out, ferret out what the grape is and where it is grown, even if you don't put it on the front label. We're going to tell you, but that is not to dumb it down, but to help you discover another opportunity to to enjoy the product. And wherever possible, something else when it comes to just things we couldn't do 25 years ago was we have doubled down on maps at wine.com. And the cool thing here is for years and years, if a winery could tell us, where they're located, we allowed them to, we geocoded the location and then open up another little browser window and drop you off onto Google Maps so you can see. I did this because we really wanted to show the difference between wine made by real people in a real place versus those that might be made in a negotiant winery or even private label, which we sell none of. Everything we sell are made by wineries and authentic wineries. So no private label. That just helps me distinguish between those companies who do have made up fictitious brands and such. So okay, that's dropping them off. But recently, and it's not launched site-wide today, but you can get to it, is the map view. So I would encourage our listeners here to check out as they go to drop off onto the region of Italy. Click you can see list view, which is just all the Italian wines. It's 2,500 I mentioned, but you can click map view, and we open up a map live in a big part of the site, especially visible on a laptop over a mobile device, but they both work. But it gives you a chance to really then drill into these regions, and especially if the regions have sub-regions, obviously, Chianti within Tuscany and Chianti Classico within Chianti within Tuscany. So this concentric circles is a way to help consumers learn. And this is powerful, and we're thrilled about this. But this is, again, leveraging information that we already know about the brands, about the wines we're selling, and mixing it up now with these dynamic maps that consumers have been used to on, whether they're looking for a restaurant reservation, an open table, or a hotel, you expect to find the map. And
it's a great point.
I think we're the first to do this with e-commerce and wine, and it's a real thrill. This is a new feature this year, and the adoption is huge.
That's amazing. And I think especially for Italy, that's a huge opportunity, right? I think I heard a stat that this summer, 81% of Americans that are traveling in Europe. So we know that Americans are flooding the streets right now in Rome and throughout Italy and other parts of Europe. But for all those people coming back from their summer vacations who fell in love with Tuscany or maybe fell in love with Sicily, we know that was a popular region this summer. Now they can shop by the places they travel to and connect the wine to their experiences. I always hear friends saying, "Oh, I just got back from Italy. I love the wines there. I want to find the wines I drank." And I think this map feature seems like a great way for consumers to do just that. So that's really exciting, Mike, and I can't wait to check that out. So, I want to ask before we wind down a little bit more about what our listeners, wineries specifically, can do to maximize their presence on wine.com in terms of the information they can share. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I might even start with the wineries who we don't represent today, and they might wonder how they can get listed on wine.com or in our catalog, if you will. And that does start with having a U.S. importer to bring your wines in. As retailers in all these states, we actually are not importers of wine. We source from importers and their wholesalers. So for a wine to really be seen by consumers in for us to list it, the winery needs to have distribution. I always like to have them both in New York and California market.
Good to know.
And then, optionally they could have distribution, and we would add them the wines if they had them in Massachusetts or Ohio, New Jersey, and in Texas alike. But the real, the sticking point would be, having distribution in the two largest states in the country. That reaches, a little more than 3/4 of our customers, those two states alone.
Oh, wow.
So that's the first thing. And that is distribution, and it's, the basic blocking and tackling that you have to do to get to any retail account. And there are no shortcuts at wine.com to make that happen. It has to be available and sold for us to order and reorder every day. In terms of separating oneself from another, what makes your Chianti stand out from your neighbor, auditing the content on the wineries. We have what we call the winery's homepage.
Okay.
That's where we included, description of the property. We, more importantly than that, or more popular, I should say, than that, is a carousel of images or videos even. Not nobody's going to watch a documentary on your property. I mean, you might. But, so we're thinking about these are little clips, 3 to 4 minute videos are perfect, even less if possible. Videos, photographs with captions. We don't just need to have someone standing in the tasting room or
Right.
the cellar door, but rather tell us that was the winemaker or the proprietor. And so the carousel of images is really important. I mentioned geocoding. Again, if the winery's open to the public, we encourage them to tell us what that location is. Make sure we can jump off with Google Earth to see it.
Very cool.
That information is at the brand level, and then at the product level, the item or wine label, if you will. We are constantly aggregating content. So the winemaker note, the attributes about the wine, whether it's certified green or organic, or whether it is finished in a screw cap or not, different attributes about the wine, right? And then popular press, it matters to consumers. We do allow customers to rate their own wine on a 10-point scale, or 5 stars that we show, but we give half stars in between. So the 10-point star scale is alive and well at wine.com. That's for consumer ratings. But professional reviewers, publications like the Wine Enthusiast and Wine Spectator, James Suckling, Vinitaly, and others. We have a whole slew of journalists who follow the industry. We love citing their press as well, because that helps the consumer,
Right.
make a distinction. And so that content, I call it, that needs to be audited and looked at. We do count on our importers and wholesalers and brands to provide it to us oftentimes, or we ask for it if we think there's something that's errantly missing. But proactively, our suppliers send emails and can correct, even there could be an error, right? Correct an appellation or a variety of grape or something. If we get something wrong, we encourage them to reach out to us in email. And we have an email box that's simply called content@wine.com that helps that purpose of filling in the gaps. Yeah, for your listeners.
That's fantastic. I can't tell you how often, we get inquiries about, information being wrong online and suppliers not knowing where to go to fix it. So that content, you said content@wine.com, Mike, just repeating that for our listeners.
Yeah. And also, if there are brands that we're missing, or there's questions about just the trade practices at wine.com and how to get their wine in our assortment, I should also share that the team responds to an email box called trade@wine.com. And that is our trade email, manned by many people, as opposed to just giving you my email address or one of the merchants on top of the Italian category. But just the idea of some Q&A can be answered. Trade@wine.com is the other very helpful email address.
Fantastic. Okay, great. I feel like everyone should have their email contacts open and be adding those 2 emails to their list. So perfect. Thank you, Mike. Well, we end every episode with our little rapid fire quiz in order to hammer home our key takeaways from today's episode. And Mike, you shared so much incredible information for our listeners. So if you can do your best to answer these questions in just a couple of sentences, that would be fantastic. So question number 1, what are some of the main ways that e-commerce in wine has changed over the last 25 years?
Juliana, I'd be remiss if I didn't say mobile. And I'd missed it earlier, and when we had a little conversation about it. But clearly, the big change is mobile. It's the iPhone or Google device is always with you. It's with you when you have a drink at a restaurant or at a friend's house. And so we obviously the wine.com website renders well in a mobile environment, but our app is extraordinarily popular, and that is actually more than half of our traffic.
Amazing.
To the wine.com site is the app. And that's a wonderful experience. And again, I think it's appropriate because it's with you.
Absolutely.
So that's probably clearly something we couldn't have fathomed as quick as we could, from 98 here. And that's been a recent, trend, obviously, with mobile taking over the desktop.
Okay. Mobile. Fantastic. Question number 2, what are some of the key trends you're seeing today in what's selling in the Italian wine category specifically?
It's all doing so well. It's hard to nitpick some things. As I mentioned, we saw Nebbiolo grow over Sangiovese in the last 12 months. It'll be interesting to see if that's sustainable and the like. But I wouldn't read too highly into that. Like if I were a producer in either one of those environments, I think consumers, are just buying more breadth. I've also seen like our top 10 varieties, when I clump them together, are smaller than the top 10 a year ago by about 3%, meaning consumers are buying more long tail, and that can be said probably over regions just as well as over varieties of grapes.
And then finally, how can wineries amplify and build their presence on wine.com, whether they're already there or if they're trying to get onto the website?
Yeah, I would encourage them to look at the material. If we're currently selling their wine, it should be the most accurate storytelling. And I like the term amplify because that's our job. We don't want to editorialize about the brand message. We want to amplify the brand's message, but to a whole lot more customers. And so then they could reach, on their own. So I think it's, auditing the material, updating us when we're missing a review, or maybe the label changed ever so slightly and we have the old label, anything. Own it. Own your brand content on wine.com and let us know when we're not as accurate as we should be. That's table stakes for e-commerce. And I know a lot of, we get asked, how can we list our wine ahead of our neighbors? Like, let's not worry about that today. Let's fix your own.
Right.
and continue. Obviously, I said it earlier, we don't make any wine ourselves. I don't like private labels. Just producers make beautiful wine, authentic wine made by real people in real places, and Italy stands for that. And all over the country, obviously from the further south to the north, it's spectacular. Let's just get that message out.
Absolutely. And that email again is content@wine.com if you need to correct or add any information to your winery's profile. Correct, Mike?
Yeah, it's correct.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for being here today on the Italian Wine Podcast. We really appreciate you sharing all the data about the Italian wine category and also more broadly about what's happening at wine.com. It's really exciting to see all the growth, and you're such an incredible leader for our whole industry. So thank you again for taking the time today. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Juliana.
Thank you for joining me today. Stay tuned each week for new episodes of Masterclass US Wine Market with me, Juliana Colangelo. And remember, if you enjoyed today's show, hit the like and follow buttons wherever you get your podcasts.